Okay, good morning. Happy Friday to each and every one of you. Today is October 13th. Welcome to the Legislative Committee. At this point, if I can turn to the Secretary for roll call.
You want to do roll call? Go ahead, do roll call. Just do roll call.
Oh, do roll call?
Yeah.
Just
two members.
Okay. Buscaino is here. McCallum?
Here.
Here.
Nelson? Supervisor Nelson?
Not here yet.
Okay. And then Dr. Parker is not here yet? Chair Mitchell is absent and Supervisor Rutherford is absent.
Okay, so this is a meeting of the whole. We do not have a quorum. Is that my understanding?
Yes, you don't have a quorum.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll, well, not fantastic, but we will move forward on the report. Leave the number and just note and file. At this point, if I can direct your attention to the agenda. We'll begin with the federal update first. Okay, we'll go with the federal update first. And item number one, I believe we have Gary on the line.
Yes, Gary's here. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My report focuses on the White House and the executive branch. And I just have a few updates from my written report here, and I just want to re-emphasize my discussion there about the developments regarding infrastructure. We're following very closely behind-the-scenes maneuvering and developments on infrastructure. Obviously, because in our advocacy efforts here, we're focused on that because of its potential to be a significant source of federal funding that could be used to help in the clean air arena. And we're going to be talking to the White House and members of Congress about that as we go forward. So we're interested in these developments. We see that the president is kind of rejiggering things a little bit behind the scenes and maybe is more amenable to putting more federal money into it. So we're watching that very closely, while a lot of the focus right now publicly is more focused on the tax reform. We look to infrastructure being the next big thing coming after that, either later this year or early next year. So we're continue to be focused on that. Secondly, quick update from the Environmental Protection Agency. You may have heard that the agency has come out with its repeal notice on the Clean Power Plan from the Obama administration. This was not unexpected, but it did come down here this past week. The EPA taking a very different approach to what the Clean Air Act allows, what the Clean Air Act authority is with regard to regulating power plants and that sort of thing. They've rejiggered the cost-benefit analysis, and so that was a major announcement here last week. Also wanted to point out the president the other day designated the month of October to be National Energy Awareness Month. Again, his notice on that talks about the importance of protecting the environment, protecting clean air. He emphasizes the progress that has been made over so many years on the clean air front, and urges that that progress be continued. So that's, in a general way, that's what was talked about there. And then in addition to that, I just want to point out a couple of key appointments. We're following developments, some of the sub-cabinet positions of interest to us. Notice that Andrew Wheeler's been appointed to be Deputy Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. Andrew spent 14 years at the Environment and Public Works Committee. He's someone who's well known to us. I mean, I've worked with him since the mid-'90s, and in my work with Senator Inhofe and that sort of thing. So he's a known quantity. I know he's known to people at the at AQMD as well. And also wanted to point out the appointment formally coming down the other day with Kathleen Hartnett-White being appointed to the Council on Environmental Quality chair. We've been waiting for that appointment to come through. She's the former Texas Commissioner of Environmental Quality. And then we see in the cabinet level the appointment the other day, the president announcing that Kirsten Nielsen will be the new Department of Health and Human Services Secretary. She had worked previously in the DHS and also in the George W. Bush administration at the Transportation Security Administration. So those are a few quick updates on the federal agency front. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Mayor McCallum, any questions?
None here, thank you.
Thank you. Let's now move on to Cassidy Associates. I believe Amelia's on the line.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's Amelia with Cassidy and Associates. We don't have updates on the legislative front from our report, but I do want to mention something more for situational awareness that seems to have consumed most of the oxygen on the energy front, Department of Energy front, and Energy and Commerce Committee front, and that's a proposal that was recently put out by Department of Energy that would, under the auspices of increasing grid reliability, potentially provide the ability to charge higher rates for energy generation from coal and nuclear facilities. And this is a petition that is before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so it's not a legislative initiative. It is basically something that FERC is now in FERC's lap, and the FERC commissioners will consider. What it has done is sort of excite basically every other type of energy generation, either consumer or natural gas, oil and gas, solar and wind developers who believe that what this does is disadvantage anything other than nuclear and coal. It's just, again, something for your situational awareness, but given the tight timeline that FERC is considering this, there's only a 20-day comment period, I believe. Everyone is in the energy space is sort of focused on it, and in particular, any sort of energy development company or utility that doesn't rely on coal or nuclear. So happy to put something together if you have more interest in sort of learning about it. It's pretty wonky, but it is getting an incredible amount of attention here right now.
We love wonky.
And that's all.
Thank you. Staff, I just wanted to defer to staff on the request, or we want Amelia to look.
This is Jill Wynett. I just am curious to see, do you think that it has any chance of succeeding?
You know, I think we spent probably an hour talking about it yesterday, and this would be sort of everyone at our firm that works on these issues, both Republicans and Democrats, and I think we're all sort of scratching our heads as to what the trajectory is. It would be an earthquake in terms of the impact to the energy market if FERC takes the proposal as DOE recommended. I think the likely outcome is they may modify it some or put in some different process, but I just don't think anyone can say with any amount of certainty what will happen. It's highly unusual.
Okay, because I know in California we only get about, at this point, less than 25% of our imported electricity generation is from coal. But it might be something we want to weigh in on. So we'll follow up with you after the meeting and talk a little bit more about it.
Sure,
Thank you for
thanks.
bringing that up.
Okay, Mayor McCallum, any questions for me?
None here.
Okay, thank you, sir. Our report, federal government update would be from Associate Dave Ramey on the line. Dave?
Yes, I am. Council member and board members, good morning. Dave Ramey here. You have our written report, which covers what's going on primarily in the Congress and what the delegation is trying to do for you. I know that we're continuing to pursue co-sponsors for the DERA legislation, the reauthorization. We've been engaged on the glider issue and the 5% set aside within an infrastructure bill if we ever get to one. And we've been helping with the planned trip for your staff on those issues. The Senate Appropriations Full Committee has announced a markup on the Interior bill, which oversees the EPA budget as well for next week, so that's good. The House, of course, has completed its appropriations work and is waiting to marry that up with whatever Senate product there is. We're theoretically in session through December 8th. That gives you 24 legislative days in the House, which includes arrival and departure travel days, and 28 legislative days in the Senate. But all the talk is from the Speaker and others is that we'll be here right up till Christmas in an effort to get the tax bill done, which everyone believes, of course, is a precursor, paid for in part for the infrastructure bill that Gary was talking about earlier. So that's where we stand, and I'm planning to bring my Christmas decorations into the office.
And Councilmember Busquin, this is Derek Alatorre. If I could just mention, Dave had mentioned the upcoming trip that staff is going out to DC on. Staff will be leaving on this coming Tuesday, the 17th, come back on the 19th. We're going to be visiting the Vice President's office as well as members' offices to discuss, as Dave mentioned, the glider kit, DERA reauthorization, and also the infrastructure proposal. Those are very important items for us, and we're going to be visiting and letting them know how important it is for not only us but for the other states.
Thanks, Eric. Dave, I had a question, Joe Buscaino, on HR 3107. I indicated in your report on the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. It seems like we have great bipartisan support, and it looks like it's the authorization bill. Where are we at today on HR 3107? It's always good to see a bipartisan effort on reducing emissions as it relates to diesel. As you know, it impacts more complex communities.
The companion legislation in the Senate has moved further along, which is good news as well. And there is bipartisan support for the House bill that you mentioned. And we're trying to add to that. Your staff out there has given us instructions to generate more support, more co-sponsors. And of course, there's appropriation support for that program, but it'd be good to have it reauthorized. And so, given the extra legislative days I mentioned that we're going to have, I'm hopeful that that bill will be able to move and the program can be reauthorized. But nevertheless, even if it doesn't move in this session, it's good to have a lot of activity with members being urged to co-sponsor it, and it gives the broader coalition that you all and your staff are involved in around the nation something to do, because there's a good package of information that they're beating the brush on with other state delegations to get their members in different regions of the country to co-sponsor it, because we've successfully put aside the notion that it's a California-based program, because it does spread all over the country. I think California only gets about 22% historically of DERA funding. So we're hopeful.
Thank you for that. It wraps up our federal update. Mayor McCallum, any questions, comments before we move on to our state update?
Here.
Okay. Let's move on to our next item, item number 2, which is a legislative update from our folks in Sacramento. Gonzalez and Sons. Paul, you on the line?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Paul is on the line. Good morning, committee members. I wanted to provide just a brief update to my written report, which you guys all have. As you know, the legislature adjourned on September 15th, but not before sending the governor over 1,300 bills for his consideration. And as you guys know, the governor has until this Sunday to take action on those bills. So I would like to provide just a quick update on some of the legislation of interest to the district that has been acted on by the governor. First is AB 1073 by Eduardo Garcia. Some remember Eduardo Garcia. This is the bill that extends from 2018 to 2020 the requirement for CARB to dedicate 20% of the clean truck, bus, and off-road vehicle and equipment technology program to support early commercial deployment of existing zero and near zero emission heavy-duty trucks. So going back to your point, Mr. Chairman, about doing everything we can to reduce diesel emissions. Additionally, the governor also signed AB 1082 and AB 1083, both by Assemblywoman Burke. These are the bills that establish the pilot programs for charging stations at schools and parks and beaches. Lastly, the governor signed a two-bill package by Assemblymember Murasucci, AB 1646 and AB 1647. These are the two bills that require fence line monitoring near each refinery and requires that when there's an incident at that refinery or at any refinery, that the refinery works with the local emergency agencies to notify the public. So that concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, colleagues? Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, you know, I can say as we prepare for the Clean Air Action Plan, both boards are meeting on the 2nd of November. There's been some concerns from industry and those who have been concerned about the best available technology. We are hopeful that some of these dollars, these cap and trade dollars that have been earmarked for reducing emissions, come to the port so we can focus on creating that technology to reduce emissions in the port complex. So looking at continue partnering with our stakeholders, report Paul, and let's fight for those dollars to come down to the district. Okay, with that, Gonzalez, Donna, Hunter, Cruz, we have Will or Jacob on the line.
Good morning, Chairman and members. This is Will Gonzalez. Jacob's on the line too, but is feeling under the weather, so I'm going to go ahead and present. The only major update we wanted to provide a bit of good news on one of our sponsored bills, AB 1274 by Assemblyman O'Donnell. This is the bill to extend the smog check exemption on newer model year cars and thereby increasing funding to the Carl Moyer program. The governor just signed that bill early this week. So I think for the district, and I think district staff can correct me on this, I think this more or less triples the available funding in the state for Carl Moyer programs, and that'll be effective. We had to give DMV some time to implement the program, so effective January 1st, 2019, we'll see a tripling of the Carl Moyer funding. So that, obviously, in conjunction with the GGRF funding that we were able to secure, I think overall pretty good year. I think that really concludes our update. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Will. Mayor McCallum, question?
Nothing here, thanks.
I'll move to item number 3. We have a staff presentation on summary end of year report. Philip in Diamond Bar for a report.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. As was just stated by some of our consultants, in Sacramento, the state legislature adjourned just here on September 15th for just the 27 legislative year, and it's the first year of the 2-year session, and they will reconvene on January 3rd, 2018. Overall, the state assembly and senate combined to introduce nearly 3,000 bills, with over 1,300 going to the governor for consideration. Bills that don't make it to the governor's desk, that didn't make it currently, are essentially 2-year bills and can be pursued in the next legislative year. As was said before, Sunday is the deadline for the governor to take any final actions on bills, either sign into law or veto the bills passed in 2017. Any bills not acted on by the governor will also become law. Specifically for the South Coast region, this was a very successful year, as was stated. Both of our bills sponsored by AQMD passed the legislature and were signed by Governor Brown. As was just mentioned, the recent update, AB 1274 by Assemblymember O'Donnell, was just signed into law early this week. And that is basically, as was said, the smog check abatement fee bill that would basically provide up to $25 to $30 million per year for the South Coast region going forward. That bill is an urgency bill, so it takes effect immediately, but the provisions of the bill will not be fully implemented until January 1st, 2019. Also, there was AB 1132 by Assemblywoman Christina Garcia that was signed into law, and that authorizes the Air Pollution Control Officer to issue a temporary order for abatement requiring a facility to cease operations that cause violations resulting in imminent and substantial endangerment to the public health, welfare, and environment pending a hearing by the district's hearing board. This bill has created a critical new tool that will help protect disadvantaged communities from serious toxic emission situations. Also this year, efforts to address disproportionate air quality burdens faced by disadvantaged communities and to reduce community-level health impacts of criteria pollutant and toxic emissions from large stationary sources came to fruition through AB 617 by Assemblywoman Christina Garcia. The South Coast looks forward to taking on the new programs and responsibilities that the bill mandates, including the development and implementation of community air monitoring systems and of community emission reduction programs. Also, best available retrofit control technology implementation, which involves new BART assessments and subsequent amendments to AQMD rules. And finally, uniform emission reporting that will coordinate with a statewide uniform emission reporting system created under AB 617. Further, the cap and trade program and distribution of greenhouse gas reduction fund monies took spotlight in the later stages of the legislative year. The cap and trade program and its 2020 sunset was extended until 2030 by AB 398 by Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia and will be implemented to meet greenhouse gas reduction targets of 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. This has already begun to reaffirm the cap and trade auction process and ensure that future GGRF funding will be generated in the coming years. For example, CARB's August auction generated $935 million for the state. In the end, through two budget trailer bills, AB 109 and AB 134, $1.5 billion in GGRF monies were allocated based on an agreement between the governor and legislative leadership. From AB 109, AQMD will receive a portion of $27 million made available statewide to local air districts to fund initial implementation of the new duties and responsibilities mandated by AB 617. Also, from AB 134, the South Coast will receive $107.5 million of increased Carl Moyer funding as part of a larger $250 million pot. AQMD's share is 43% based on the region's population versus the statewide population. Also, there's $645 million in additional statewide funding that's been made available largely through grant applications, including $180 million for the hybrid and zero-emission truck and bus voucher incentive program, with at least $35 million allocated for zero-emission buses. Also, $140 million for the CVRP program for rebates for light-duty vehicles. $140 million for equipment and improvement at ports, including for projects for ships at berth. $100 million for the EFMP program, and $85 million for reducing agricultural emissions through agricultural equipment, heavy-duty truck, and tractor replacement. AQMD staff will be working hard to secure the South Coast region's fair share of these grant monies to continue working towards generating sufficient clean air funding needed to meet federal air quality standards for the region. Finally, you may recall that earlier in the year, there was a transportation infrastructure package that became law through SB 1 by Senator Bell, which will generate $52 billion over the next 10 years for statewide transportation needs. A companion budget bill, SB 132, also included $50 million for a zero and near zero emission warehouse program that will be administered by CARB. I'll also highlight a few additional AQMD position bills and other bills of interest. A couple were mentioned already, but there was AB 615 was signed by Assemblymember Jim Cooper, was signed into law by the governor. That was a bill that AQMD supported, and that extends the income caps for the CVRP program to continue providing air quality and greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits through programs that encourage the purchase of zero-emission vehicles, and that'll go towards 2019. Also, there is AB 739, which requires at least 15% of specified heavy-duty vehicles newly purchased by state agencies to be zero-emission beginning in 2025, and at least 30% of those vehicles to be zero-emission through 2030. The last one I'll mention is just not a bill that AQMD took a position of work with author on. That's AB 1647 by Assemblyman Matsucci. That was described earlier. Basically, there's new deadlines, January 1st, 2020, for refinery-related community air monitoring systems to be installed and operated by local air districts, and for petroleum refineries to install and operate fence line monitoring systems. AQMD's Rule 1180 will need to be aligned with these new state requirements, and that's my report.
Okay, let the record, I appreciate the presentation. Want to welcome Supervisor Sean Nelson. Thank you for joining us, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Any questions on item number 3 before us?
No, thank you. Larry, anything? We're good.
Very good. So no actions required, presentation only. With that, let us now turn to item number 4. Before we begin item number 4, I do understand that our colleague Benoit is Diamond Bar. Do we appoint him to this committee so that we have a quorum and take this position on item number 4? Or does that have to be
Did we lose
chairman of the?
Did we lose Mayor McCallum?
No, he's still there.
So we have a quorum. We have yourself, we have Mayor McCallum, and we have Supervisor Nelson. So
3 out of 6.
3 is a quorum under the rules that the board has adopted.
Hey, Joe, I'm not fully ready to stay out.
Mayor Pro Tem Benoit indicates he would prefer not to have to vote on this item, and we do have a quorum with the members that are currently present.
So with that, let's move to number 4.
Good morning, Mark Farrell, Program Supervisor in LPA. Mr. Chair, members, the Blue Whales and Blue Skies Act, HR 3682, was introduced on September 6th by Congressman Alan Lowenthal with co-sponsors Salud Carbajal, Julia Brownlee, and Ro Khanna, all California members. The act calls on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries to establish an annual Blue Whales and Blue Skies Excellent Award to recognize shipping companies for voluntarily reducing their speeds in the Santa Barbara Channel region below 12 knots, or for participating in the Port of Los Angeles or Port of Long Beach's voluntary vessel speed reduction programs. Slowing these speeds to 12 knots or less reduces not only air emissions, but also the risk of fatal ship strikes on whales. Speed reductions on the Atlantic coast have boosted the population counts of endangered whale species. Within the next 4 years, NOAA would assess the feasibility of extending the voluntary program to encompass all shipping channels along the Pacific coast between Canada and Mexico. According to a study conducted by UC Irvine, ocean-going vessels are estimated to account for approximately 25% of NOx emissions within the South Coast Air Basin by 2020. If this program were to be extended to encompass all shipping channels along the U.S. Pacific coast in 4 years, as outlined in the bill, it would help reduce NOx emissions within our region and help AQMD meet attainment goals while protecting public health. As such, staff recommends a support position on this bill.
Thank you. We are also joined by Chairman Burke. Thank you so much for joining us. We really have a quorum now.
Good.
Mr. Vice Chair, did you wish to appoint Dr. Burke for this item?
Yeah, I'll vote in favor of this item.
So, Chair Busquino, could you please appoint Dr. Burke as he would like to participate?
Dr. Burke, committee, do we have any objection?
Well, I have some questions.
Yours, Supervisor.
Well, not to appointing him, but
It's, you have no idea how good it is to be back, Sean.
you've been missed.
All right, without objection, we'll appoint Jennifer. So back to item number 4, Supervisor Nelson has a question.
Yes, is the audio coming through okay?
Very well.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. My question really is this. I appreciate, certainly love the whales and all, but as an air quality agency, when I see things that are statistically true, such as 25% of the NOx emissions in the basin are generated by ocean-going vessels, I'm not sure what that has to do with this item, which is the suggestion that there will be a clean air benefit. And other than going a little slower has less pollution than going a little faster, is there any quantitative data at all as to what actual difference this might make? Or is it just, if we went a little slower on the freeway, odds are less people would get in accidents, therefore we'd be saving lives?
Dr.
I mean,
can address that question.
Yes, Supervisor Nelson. So right now, the ports of Long Beach and the ports of LA have a voluntary speed reduction program, and their work has shown that speed reduction is a significant reduction in NOx emissions. So this bill, while it is mentioning the safety for the blue whales, will also, if the vessel speeds are reduced in that channel, then there will be similar NOx reductions beyond the current limits of the port's vessel speed reduction program.
Right. So what does significant mean?
I'm looking to see if
there's significant reductions. Significant means what? I mean, I suspect it means something different to you than to me, but what does significant mean? That's a number without measure. Significant. I am significantly taller than you. How tall am I?
I don't have those numbers in front of me of the NOx reductions per mile of a lower speed vessel. I can get those as quickly. I don't know if I can get them before the end of the committee, but it has been.
I understand. Yeah. So, Dr. Fine, all I would ask is this, and I understand this is the burr in the saddle here, but what you would hope is that there would be some quantitative suggestion that this is the difference it would make numerically. And because we all know getting goods shipped slower than faster has a cost. And here's what it costs. And it's worth it because we couldn't do the same for the same cost. Because if we find out that shipping to the United States, which I hope we all are well aware that the ports of San Pedro and Long Beach really ship over half of the container goods that come to the United States or something like that. I mean, it's an enormous amount of the shipping traffic. So the entire United States is going to pay how much for slowing things down? And then what I hope this agency is smart enough to do is to say if we spent that same money doing something else, we'd get less or more savings. So I'd rather just not look at things in a vacuum and say, well, if a boat goes slower than faster, there's less NOx. I mean, that's great information, but in a vacuum, that doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me how much and what it cost me.
So Supervisor Nelson, two things. One is I believe the bill is entirely a voluntary program. So ships that do not want to take advantage of the program do not need to take advantage of the program. And second, looking at the write-up in the packet, it does give some quantitative numbers for NOx reductions in a trial incentive program that occurred in the same area in the Santa Barbara Channel. And it shows that in 2016, about 25.6 tons of NOx were reduced.
A little foggy this morning.
How'd you get in?
Dr. Burke.
Yeah, Bill, you might want to mute your mic.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So we do have some quantitative numbers. If you look at the summary, 25.6 tons of NOx in 2016 just from 50 slow speed vessel transits. And again, it would be a voluntary program that could be incentivized.
All right, my last comment, Mr. Chair, is just this. We don't all have to agree philosophically, and it's irrelevant if we do or not. But whatever your point of view on any issue is, the idea that you would pass a bill in the legislature and we would spend people's time, energy, and effort for something that isn't enforceable is ridiculous. It's nothing more than a statement. Laws are supposed to be mandates that either you follow or there's some punishment. We're going to pass a bill just to say we have good intentions. I mean, it's just a waste of everyone's time, and I would hope Congressman Lowenthal has better things to do. It seemed like he did when I visited with him, but perhaps that's changed.
Thank you, Sean.
Mr. Chairman,
First, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Supervisor Nelson got me. From the tenure that I spent on the 13 years I spent on California Coast, we found that there was very little correlation between what our laws were and what maritime captains did outside the 3-mile limit. So even though I am a little foggy this morning from being back, I won't be supporting this piece of legislation.
Alan?
I'm not supportive of it either. In fact, I would move that we not support it.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to oppose the item before us, HR 368. I am in a position to.
Can we clarify? I'm so
I mean,
sorry. Can we clarify what the? Can we please clarify what the motion is? No, this is Jill Wynot. Was the motion to not support, or is the motion to oppose? We're just asking for clarification.
To not support.
To not support HR 362.
Thank you.
So with that, so a yes vote is a not support, a no vote is to support, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that, let's call roll.
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum,
Yes.
Supervisor Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Buscaino,
No.
motion passes 3-1 to not support.
Okay, fantastic. With that, moving on to the agenda, number 5, any other business? Okay, hearing none. Public comment. Anyone here in the public to speak on public comment?
We have none in Diamond Bar.
None here.
Okay, hearing none. This meeting is now adjourned. Have a great rest of the day and a blessed weekend. Thank you for joining us.